This is Radio 1. Now here's Richard Evans with a special news bulletin.
Diana, Princess of Wales, and Dodi Fayed have been killed in a car crash in Paris. The accident happened as their car was being chased by photographers through a road tunnel near the Eiffel Tower. The princess died in hospital a few hours later. Newsbeat's Danny Shaw has been piecing together the story of the night.
The princess and Dodi Fayed were returning to a townhouse in the centre of Paris after dinner at the Ritz Hotel. The couple were being chased by photographers on motorbikes when Diana's Mercedes entered an underground expressway alongside the River Seine. The car overturned and hit a wall. The roof smashed down to the level of the bonnet by the violence of the impact. Dodi Fayed and the driver died instantly. Rescue workers pulled the princess from the wreckage and took her to hospital. She'd suffered severe chest injuries and was bleeding internally. She had a heart attack and, despite the efforts of doctors to revive her, died at 4 o'clock this morning. French Minister Jean-Pierre Chevènement announced the news.
It seems the vehicle the princess was travelling in was being pursued by journalists who were trying to take pictures. It seems the driver lost control of the car, which was travelling at great speed. Diana was much loved in France. She was a modern woman, a brave woman, sensitive to human suffering. Her passing will be deeply felt in our country with deep sorrow.
There was apparently one survivor of the crash, a bodyguard. French police have begun a criminal investigation. 7 photographers, all believed to be from France, are being questioned.
The Prince of Wales broke the news to Prince William and Prince Harry at Balmoral. The Queen and Prince Philip, who are said to be deeply shocked, are going to a church service at Balmoral this morning. French police say the princess's body will be flown home later today. Crowds are gathered outside the princess's London home, Kensington Palace, and outside Buckingham Palace. Some of them clubbers returning home from a night out.
Just heard a lot of devastation. The loss is just so awful. I can't believe that she's gone just like that. Just gone. I don't know what else to say. It's just devastation.
Just complete shock. Just complete shock and complete loss as well. Not so much as a member of, the monarchy, but just an icon for, I think, for far more so for like young people than you can imagine.
Dodi Fayed's father, Mohammed Al Fayed, is said to be devastated at the death of his son and the loss of what he called an irreplaceable princess. Michael Cole, his spokesman, says he's devastated by the news and believes the press are to blame.
There is no doubt in Mr. Al Fayed's mind that this tragedy would not have occurred but for the press photographers who have dogged and pursued Dodi and Princess Diana for weeks now. And this sort of pursuit is entirely unacceptable.
The Prime Minister, Tony Blair, said the whole country will be in a state of shock and mourning. Well, our media correspondent, Torin Douglas, joins us live. The sadness now seems to be turning to anger at what the press seem to have done to her, Torin.
Very much so. We don't know for certain that that's what caused it, but certainly it's looking that way. We've already got a quote from the Vice-Chairman of the Conservative National Heritage Committee, Roger Gale, who calls it the ultimate result of press intrusion. And he talks about the people being literally and needlessly driven to their deaths as the apparent result of the hounding by the paparazzi.
As we just heard, these appear to have been French photographers who were chasing him, and one report said the car was travelling at, 120 miles an hour?
That's right. Of course, there is a world market for these photographs. I mean, she was well known all over the world. People were prepared to pay very high prices, as we discovered when the first picture of her and Dodi came out. So people were prepared to take great risks.
There are bound to be calls for a change in the law now, aren't there?
There are. I think it will be difficult to change the law. I think as much as anything, they will try and get the newspapers to behave better, even if you can't get legal changes. And I think it maybe takes an event as horrific as this to perhaps make people see sense.
Torin Douglas, our media correspondent, on the death of Princess Diana in Paris last night, the woman who joined the royal family when she married the Prince of Wales in 1981.
Everyone can see the bride on the arm of her father, Lord Spencer, and carrying a bouquet of gardenias and roses with this immense train. It must be 25 feet long, streaming back behind her against the brilliant red of the carpet, smiling with a beguiling shyness, but composed and happy and confident.
Take thee, Charles Philip Arthur George.
Take thee, Philip Charles Arthur George.
To my wedded husband.
To my wedded husband.
The country stood still to watch what was billed as a fairy tale wedding of the century. He would be the next King of England. She was a shy, beautiful young woman in her 20s. Born into an aristocratic family, Diana Frances Spencer's parents had divorced when she was 6. She'd gone to a boarding school, a Swiss finishing school, and then worked in a London kindergarten.
Well, I very much look forward to going to Wales and meeting everybody. But my life will be a great challenge.
Are you looking forward to making a home at Highgrove, for example?
Oh, yes, very much so. Looking forward to being a good wife.
Soon there were 2 children, William and Harry, but before long there were reports of problems in the marriage. First arguments, then affairs. Then it was more than speculation. 5 years ago came Diana, her true story, Andrew Morton's book, in which her friends told of the true sadness of her life.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
She first went public in the Panorama interview 2 years ago. She blamed the breakdown of her marriage on her husband's love for Camilla Parker Bowles. She also spoke of her bulimia and attacked people she thought of as enemies in the palace.
She won't go quietly. That's the problem. I'll fight till the end because I believe that I have a role to fulfill. And I got 2 children to bring up.
It was then she launched herself into a new role in public life.
I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts. But I don't see myself being queen of this country. I don't think many people would want me to be queen. Actually, when I say many people, I mean the establishment that I'm married into, because they've decided that I'm a non-starter.
She agreed to a divorce only after pressure from the Queen and was already campaigning for disadvantaged people all over the world. She held the hands of people suffering from AIDS.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know. So you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it.
And recently it was a more public campaign against landmines that caused political controversy. But everywhere she went, she was chased by the press. Outside her gym, going to visit her children in school, and more recently with Dodi Fayed on holiday, despite appeals to leave her alone and an attempt to withdraw from public life.
Over the next few months, I will be seeking a more suitable way of combining a meaningful public role with hopefully a more private life. I hope you can find it in your hearts to understand and to give me the time and space that has been lacking in recent years.
The Princess of Wales, who's been killed with Dodi Fayed in a car crash in Paris as they were being chased by French photographers. 7 of them are under arrest. The Princess's former press secretary, Jane Atkinson, says her death is a national and personal tragedy.
She was very warm, she was very caring, very confident. She cared a lot about her charities, she cared a lot about her work and her family.
Radio 1 Newsbeat, I'm Richard Evans.
This is Radio 1 with the news that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been killed in a car crash in Paris. Her friend, Dodi Al-Fayed, and their driver also died in the accident late last night. There have been tributes from political and world leaders, and crowds of mourners have been gathering at Buckingham Palace and at the Princess's London home, Kensington Palace. There will be news updates throughout the day on Radio 1, and there is a continuous news service on Radio 5 Live on 909 and 693 medium wave.
At 11:30, this is Independent Radio News. The nation has been waking to the tragic news that Diana, Princess of Wales, is dead. She died after a car crash in Paris during the early hours. Dodi Al-Fayed, her constant companion of recent times, was also killed. Eyewitnesses say they were being pursued by photographers on motorbikes. Prince Charles was told of her death at Balmoral. He will fly to Paris later today to accompany her body back to the UK. Prayers are being said for the Princess across the country. Cardinal Basil Hume says he's profoundly saddened. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. George Carey, says he's deeply shocked.
I was horrified when I was told the news early this morning. My heart goes out to the family, to all those who will be grieving, particularly at this time. We've lost a vibrant, lovely young person.
Reporter Bill Neely has been inside the tunnel where the crash happened. He says French police are carefully examining the scene and are treating the fatal accident as a possible case of manslaughter.
I actually managed to get into the tunnel to the very spot where the accident had happened. And there the police have very carefully marked the road with white chalk. The first marks as you go down into the tunnel. It's a very steep incline after some bends and twists on the road. The first thing you see are the marks of the wheels on the road, where the police believe the car began to veer to the left.
Princess Diana's former press secretary, Jane Atkinson, says she's deeply saddened by what's happened.
I don't think I could believe it. When I went to bed, I knew there'd been an accident and that she was ill. And I think it's unbelievable. And I feel very sad for her family.
Now repeating the news that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died after a car crash in Paris. Her tragic death has sent a wave of grief around the nation and the world. Independent Radio News.
This is 96.9 Viking FM. Due to the death of Diana, the Princess of Wales, our normal programmes have been suspended. There's more in our next news at 11:30.
88 to 91 FM, Radio 2 from the BBC. It's 1 o'clock. This is a specially extended news bulletin with Paul Leighton. People in Britain and around the world have expressed their dismay and grief at news of the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. Prince Charles is to fly to Paris and return to Britain tonight with her body. The Princess's brother, Lord Spencer, has bitterly criticised press photographers who are thought to have been chasing the Princess when her car crashed. People around the world are absorbing the shock of the news of the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. She died in hospital in Paris from injuries she sustained in a car crash in the early hours of this morning. Her companion, Dodi Al-Fayed, and a chauffeur were also killed when the car they were travelling in went out of control in a road tunnel beside the River Seine in the centre of the city. Buckingham Palace said the Queen and the Prince of Wales were deeply shocked and distressed. Diana's sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, were given the news by their father. The Prince of Wales, accompanied by Princess Diana's two sisters, Lady Jane Fellows and Lady Sarah McCorquodale, are flying to Paris to thank medical staff who tried to save her life. They'll return with her body this evening. Her brother, Lord Spencer, who lives in South Africa, said Diana understood the most precious needs of human beings. Her vibrancy and sparkle, combined with a very real sense of duty, were now gone forever. The Prime Minister, Tony Blair, said the Princess would be remembered with the deepest affection and love.
The people everywhere, not just here in Britain, everywhere, they kept faith with Princess Diana. They liked her, they loved her. They regarded her as one of the people. She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain in our hearts and in our memories forever.
The opposition leader, William Hague, said Princess Diana's death had come as a great shock to everyone.
She was a unique and very lively and attractive individual, and so people will feel a personal sense of loss. But of course we should also pay tribute today to the tremendous work that she did for people involved with drugs, people with AIDS and other diseases, for homeless people, for young people in general, for causes such as the arts. She did a great deal of charitable and humanitarian work.
Church leaders have also paid tribute to Princess Diana. The leader of the Roman Catholic Church in England and Wales, Cardinal Basil Hume, said she'd made a tremendous contribution to the nation. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. George Carey, said the Princess had many qualities.
The word passion seemed to sum her up. I mean, a commitment to people, to issues, to causes. For example, the first time I met her was through her association with the leprosy mission, her concern for those who suffer from leprosy, then again through AIDS. She and I had many conversations about helping the vulnerable and the weak, because there's a sense in which, from her own vulnerability, she manifested her strength.
World leaders have been expressing their shock and grief at the death. President Clinton said he and his wife Hillary were profoundly saddened, while President Mandela of South Africa said he was completely devastated by the news. News of the death of the Princess began to emerge from Paris in the early hours of the morning. It was confirmed at around 5 o'clock by the French Interior Ministry. From Paris, Kevin Connolly.
The Princess and Dodi Al Fayed had arrived in Paris yesterday afternoon, dining at the Ritz before setting off across the city at around midnight. The paparazzi who had so often hounded her, and for whom the couple represented a lucrative picture opportunity, were lying in wait. A posse on motorbikes followed her car closely in the fast-moving traffic in what became a deadly high-speed chase. As it entered a tunnel on one of the embankments beside the Seine, the car carrying the princess's party went out of control and smashed into a wall. So great was the violence of the impact that the roof of the car was crushed down to the level of the bonnet and the whole front section completely destroyed. Mr. Al Fayed and the driver were declared dead very soon afterwards. In the small hours of the morning, ominously, there was no word of the princess beyond a bald statement that her condition was serious. Within a few hours, the French Interior Minister Jean-Pierre Chevènement had announced solemnly that she had died, in spite of a long fight by surgeons to save her. In Paris, there has been a sense of unreality, so great was the shock. Now that is giving way to real grief and a sense of revulsion at the involvement of the paparazzi in her death.
This morning, the Prince of Wales and his sons joined the Queen to attend a special church service at Crathy Church near Balmoral. Colin Blaine reports from outside the church.
After the shock of Princess Diana's death, the royal family came out from Balmoral Castle to go to church, a family bound together by what had happened. They drove past a small, silent crowd up the hill to the tiny church at Crathy. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen Mother, dressed all in black. In another car, Prince Charles travelled with Prince William and Prince Harry, to whom he'd had to break the news during the night that their mother was dead. This is a church with long royal connections. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh attended last Sunday in very different circumstances. Crathy's minister, the Reverend Robert Sloane, said the whole congregation shared the shock and the grief of the royal family. Afterwards, as the 3 black royal limousines drove away, the Queen gave a single slow wave to the crowd.
Crowds have been gathering outside Buckingham Palace and Princess Diana's official residence, Kensington Palace, to pay their respects and lay floral tributes. Some of those present spoke about the princess.
In the case of AIDS, she did so much to change public attitudes, just by this very simple things, by touching people's hands and by holding them.
She was just a shining light, and she was there for everybody. And I'm just glad towards the end she found happiness. At least she died knowing real happiness, I think.
She was just a wonderful person. I think that she's completely irreplaceable. I don't think anyone could take her place, and I think it's going to leave a terrible void in everybody's lives.
The circumstances of the death of the princess have refocused attention on the role of the press and the whole question of privacy. 7 men, believed to be working for newspapers, are being questioned by the French authorities. It's thought the men were chasing the princess's car when the accident happened. Here's our media correspondent, Torin Douglas.
While the government said this is a time for reflection and it's too soon to consider tighter controls on newspapers, the families of the princess and Dodi Al-Fayed have made it clear they blame the press for their deaths. A spokesman for Mohammed Al-Fayed said the couple wouldn't have died if they hadn't been being chased by photographers. The princess's brother, Earl Spencer, went further.
This is not a time for recriminations, but for sadness. However, I would say that I always believed the press would kill her in the end. But not even I could imagine that they would take such a direct hand in her death, as seems to be the case. It would appear that every proprietor and editor of every publication that has paid for intrusive and exploitative photographs of her, encouraging greedy and ruthless individuals to risk everything in pursuit of Diana's image, has blood on his hands today.
Allan Rusbridger, editor of The Guardian, said there'd be a fierce backlash against the press, and editors needed to do a lot of soul-searching. And the former Heritage Secretary, David Mellor, said there should be a self-denying ordinance among publishers, and this might be a defining moment for the press and privacy.
Now, to look back over the life of the princess, here's our court correspondent, Paul Reynolds.
The story of the Princess of Wales began as a fairy tale and ended as a nightmare. And not only did it leave her devastated, it helped to trigger a debate about the future of the monarchy unprecedented in modern times. Diana revealed her feelings in an interview with the BBC Panorama programme in 1995.
I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts. But I don't see myself being queen of this country. I don't think many people would want me to be queen. Actually, when I say many people, I mean the establishment that I'm married into, because they've decided that I'm a non-starter.
She spoke, too, about the failure of her marriage, which she blamed on her husband's love for another woman.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
The other woman was Camilla Parker Bowles, with whom Prince Charles had already admitted having an affair. Diana described the pressures which led to her suffering from the eating disorder bulimia. But the interview also showed her tougher side as she fought her corner against those she regarded as her enemies in the establishment.
She won't go quietly, that's the problem. I'll fight till the end, because I believe that I have a role to fulfill. And I got 2 children to bring up.
Diana Frances Spencer was born on July the 1st, 1961. She came from an aristocratic family. Her father had been an equerry to George VI and the present Queen. Her parents separated when she was 6, and she never forgot the sound of her mother's departing footsteps on the drive. Her education wasn't extensive, boarding school for a time in Kent, finishing school in Switzerland. Then she began work in London with children. Her engagement to Prince Charles was announced in February 1981. Her early shyness was evident as she answered questions.
Well, I very much look forward to going to Wales and meeting everybody, but my life will be a great challenge.
Are you looking forward to making a home at Highgrove, for example?
Oh yes, very much so. Looking forward to being a good wife.
The wedding was at St Paul's Cathedral.
Everyone can see the bride on the arm of her father, Lord Spencer, and carrying a bouquet of gardenias and roses with this immense train. It must be 25 feet long, streaming back behind her against the brilliant red of the carpet, smiling with a beguiling shyness, but composed and happy and confident.
I'm Diana Frances.
Take thee, Charles Philip Arthur George,
Take thee, Philip Charles Arthur George,
to my wedded husband.
to my wedded husband.
2 children were born, William and Harry. On the surface, all seemed well. Lady Di, as she was known around the world, became a popular figure, and not just of fashion. She started speaking up for the disadvantaged, like the victims of AIDS.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know. So you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it.
But all was not well. The popular press was hinting at problems in the marriage, and this was dramatically confirmed in 1992 in a book by Andrew Morton, which, with Diana's consent, revealed the true sadness of her life. In December that year, the separation was announced. But she continued to show interest in the sick and disadvantaged, and she gave a major impetus to the campaign against landmines with visits to Angola and Bosnia. As she struggled to find a new life for herself, Diana was left isolated as something of a tragic figure.
Our court correspondent, Paul Reynolds. BBC News at 12 minutes past 1. Our next scheduled news at 2 o'clock.
And this is Desmond Carrington in Scotland with you on Radio 2. On an occasion which, like most of us, I still can't really believe. Obviously, our intended programme of all-time greats has been set aside for the next 2 hours, and I'm simply going to play some music which I hope you will find helps to reflect the mood of the nation at a solemn and sad time. The Philip Jones Brass Ensemble, with a piece of music written in the 16th century by Tieleman Susato, a suite of Elizabethan dances which have found great favour in the past year or so, having been recorded by various British ensembles, and I think that version from the Philip Jones Brass is one of the very best. Well, church leaders have, of course, been addressing their congregations, and indeed all of us via radio and television this morning, trying to help us to come to terms with the sudden news about the death of Princess Diana. Perhaps there is one prayer above all others that we can echo together. The Lord's Prayer, recorded in the 30s by the American baritone John Charles Thomas.
You're listening to Radio 1. This is a special news bulletin from Tina Richie.
The Prince of Wales is due to arrive in Paris after the death of Princess Diana in a car crash in the French capital early this morning. She died with her friend Dodi Al-Fayed when their car crashed into a tunnel wall. It was being chased by the French paparazzi. 7 of them are being questioned by police. This afternoon, the Prince will meet the French President Jacques Chirac at the hospital where Diana was taken after the crash, before returning to RAF Northolt tonight with her body. The Prime Minister Tony Blair will be there to greet him. There's been a reaction of shock and grief throughout the world. A few moments ago, President Clinton said he was told about her death while on holiday. He said she was a special person.
We liked her very much. We admired her work for children, for people with AIDS. for the cause of ending the scourge of landmines in the world, and for her love for her children, William and Harry. And I know that this is a very difficult time for millions of people in the United Kingdom who are deeply shocked and grieving. And the American people send their condolences to all of them, and we value their friendship, and we understand this great and painful experience. For myself, I will always be glad that I knew the princess, and always think of her in very strong and positive terms, as will Hillary. And we can only hope that her work will go forward, and that everyone who can will support her two fine sons and help them to have the life and the future that she would want. Thank you.
The head of the United Nations has praised Diana for her humanitarian work. Secretary-General Kofi Annan said she'd made a major contribution to help people who were suffering. He said the tragedy has robbed the world of a committed voice for the improvement of the lives. Thousands of mourners have gathered at the Princess's London home and at Buckingham Palace. People who live near Diana's childhood home in Northamptonshire have been laying flowers at the gates. Betty Andrew was the housekeeper at Althorp House and remembers Diana as a teenager.
She was a typical girl, really, and I mean, she used to enjoy going around the park, and especially when Charles came home, a baby brother, when he came home from school, she used to look after him and do his washing. She used to come into the kitchen when I was cooking and make things for herself.
Arrangements for Princess Diana's funeral are being made now. We'll bring you those details as soon as we have them. Radio 1 Newsbeat, I'm Tina Richie.
This is Mark Goodier at Radio 1. Because of the tragic news of the death of Princess Diana, Radio 1 has suspended all regular programmes today as a mark of respect. And that means today we won't be broadcasting the Top 40. But we will bring you regular news updates throughout the evening. 4:15. This is Mark Goodier at Radio 1. Radio 1 has suspended regular programmes today as a mark of respect for Diana, Princess of Wales, who was killed in a car crash in Paris early this morning. We'll have regular news bulletins, but today there will be no UK Top 40.
It's 5 o'clock. This is Charlie Lee Potter and Allan Robb with the BBC News Special on Radio 4 and Radio 5 Live.
In the next hour, we'll have more tributes to Diana, Princess of Wales, who died in the early hours of this morning following a high-speed car crash in Paris. We'll have full reports from all over Britain and around the world. First, a summary of the day's events from David McNeil.
The Prince of Wales is in Paris visiting the hospital where Diana, Princess of Wales, died during the night following a car crash, which also killed her friend Dodi Al-Fayed and their chauffeur. The Prince, accompanied by Diana's two sisters, will return to Britain with his former wife's body this evening. He'll be met on his return to RAF Northolt in West London by the Prime Minister. The Princess's body will be taken to a private mortuary in the London area. No details of her funeral have yet been announced. The Duchess of York has issued a statement saying that she's lost a sister. She said there were no words strong enough to describe the pain in her heart. The world had lost the most compassionate of humanitarians whose presence could never be replaced. Political leaders at home and abroad have been paying tribute. Tony Blair said Diana would be remembered as the People's Princess. The Conservative leader, William Hague, said he felt stunned, and the Liberal Democrat leader, Paddy Ashdown, said a light had gone out. President Clinton said Princess Diana would be remembered in the United States for her courage and compassion. President Chirac of France described her as a woman who was warm, full of life and generosity. And President Mandela of South Africa said he was devastated by the princess's death. He praised her work in the field of AIDS and her crusade against landmines. Chancellor Kohl said that Germans had warmed to the princess because of her open-minded personality and her humanitarian commitment. The former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, said it was unfair that someone so young and so beautiful, who'd done so much for other people, should not have had her own share of happiness.
David McNeil. Within the past 20 minutes, the Prince of Wales arrived at the Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris. There he was met by the French President Jacques Chirac. He'd flown to Paris from Aberdeen with Diana's two sisters, Lady Jane and Lady Sarah. This evening, Prince Charles will return to RAF Northolt outside London with the body of his former wife. We're joined from the hospital in Paris by our correspondent Chris West and from RAF Northolt by our royal correspondent Paul Reynolds. Paul, when do you expect the Prince of Wales to return with the princess's body?
They're due in at 7 o'clock this evening on a plane of the Royal Squadron, a BA 146. It'll be a very, very simple ceremony here. No music, no drums, no funeral notes. The plane will taxi to a halt. The Prince of Wales will get off. Her two sisters will get off. Then the coffin will be lowered from the plane and taken slowly to a waiting hearse. It'll then be taken to a mortuary in London. The Prince of Wales will then continue on up to Aberdeen to rejoin his sons in Balmoral, to whom he had to break the news of their mother's death during the night.
And when do you think we will hear details of the funeral arrangements?
The funeral arrangements have been discussed during the day at Buckingham Palace and will be announced either tonight or probably tomorrow morning. The two factors governing the type of funeral are the wishes of the family and also the need and the belief that the public wants to join in this process. And so I would expect some arrangements to reflect both those points.
Chris West in Paris, outside the hospital, just as there is a sense of grief amongst the public in Britain, how much is there in Paris that this terrible thing should have happened there?
Very much a sense of grief, it seems. There are floral tributes pouring over the steps of the hospital here. It's a massive hospital, a huge amount of flowers, several hundred bunches. People have been coming up every 2 or 3 minutes. They've been laying a bunch of flowers, maybe one rose at a time, standing back, having a reflective moment, crossing themselves perhaps, and walking away. There's a sense of deep sadness and deep shock that this should have happened. People here haven't really come to grips with it at all.
While the grieving is going on, and the ceremonials are going on, the French police, of course, have been questioning 7 photographers. What's the latest on that side of affairs?
Well, they're still questioning a number of these photographers. Most of them are believed to be French, and the line they're taking is they're questioning them about the the way in which the accident happened and the way that they're trying to pursue inquiries on the lines of whether or not they stopped after the accident. They will probably charge them with failing to stop after an accident, failing to adopt the correct procedures. This, of course, would appear to be a holding charge, and other charges could well follow. But all of this is in the hands of the public prosecutor, and he may well decide to put an examining magistrate onto the case, which will take it further.
Chris West in Paris and Paul Reynolds outside RAF Northolt. Thank you both.
This is Allan, Robb and Charlie D. Potter with a BBC News special on Radio 4 and 5 Live.